this idea similar to pressure and performance, where if there's too much pressure, you don't perform. If there's too little pressure, you don't perform. And I think ambition is like that too, where we don't have enough ambition, we can start to become stagnant.
Kathy Oneto, welcome to the Lindsey Elmore Show.
Well, Lindsey, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about sustainable ambition today. Because so often I think people get it in their head that we have to achieve. And we get into this mindset of if we don't just have more and more and more all of the time, day in and day out, sometimes without us even realizing it, it can take a toll on us emotionally and physically and relationally. Talk to us about how you see this more mentality just present itself, and what are the costs of living in this way?
Yes, it's a great question. Well, our society today, really impacts us to lean into kind of wanting to do more. And, we are, as humans, naturally influenced by our external world. And so that's a natural thing. But as you said, there are these costs to us feeling like we need to do more. So how does that show up? Well, one way that shows up is, today in today's world, kind of this idea of the fear of missing out, right? Thinking that we always need to be doing things, or we're seeing other people doing things. And what can happen is we start chasing more, and not checking in to really determine, well, is that something I really want to do? It can also start to lead to us, putting more on our plates than we really have the capacity for. So it's very natural for us humans, again, to be overly optimistic about all that we want to do or that we can do rather. And we also have a bias toward adding things. But the problem is, right, that we can always get overloaded and overextend ourselves when we are constantly saying yes to things. And then also in our world, we have these ideal norms that have formed, ideal workers, ideal parenting. And that also influences us to think we always need to be doing more. That also leads to this factor that so many of us today in our work are always on. We're always connected. And so what does that lead to? It can lead to us ultimately, if I go back to even the first one, we're chasing things that were influenced by external forces. We may be chasing things we don't even want. So then we end up being unsatisfied and we're wondering why. We're chasing things and doing more and putting more on our plates. So we're constantly overwhelmed. And if we're always on, right, and we're always leading, trying to achieve these ideals, we're overextending ourselves and getting overexhausted. We're stressed. And oftentimes we're not recovering enough to really be able to sustain ourselves.
So I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this idea of external versus internal motivations. Because if somebody is living in a situation where they are either unhappy or they're overweight or they're not sleeping or they've got an unhealthy marriage or whatever is going on in their lives that's not this kind of North Star of where they want to go, where instead of having that fear of missing out, they're like, I will leave this stuff out because I'm in pursuit of this thing. I personally don't quite care if the motivation is extrinsic or intrinsic. I just want people to get up, move, try something, be unafraid to fail, and just say, I'm going to get out there and live life. If someone is in a situation where they're like, I haven't gotten off the couch in, a month, and I don't care what it is, But if it's an extrinsic motivation, I'm going to use it to get me off the couch. But yet, at some point, we really want to find what is in us that is driving us towards our purpose and something greater. How do you take people from inaction through the inertia if we have to use that extrinsic motivation, validation to eventually land us at purpose? How do you walk people through that pathway?
I really love this, Lindsey, and I appreciate you bringing this up because I too don't like to live in the land of either or. I think that there is a reality that external is not all bad, right? To your point. And many of us are achievement oriented and we want some of those external accolades, right? And so it's not all bad. And you're right. Sometimes we need some of these external forces to help motivate us, right? And by the way, some of that external kind of feedback feeds our self-efficacy and gives us confidence to continue moving forward. So I totally agree with you. External isn't all bad. And the other component of it is, when we don't know ourselves as well, which by the way, life is a learning journey, learning about ourselves and understanding ourselves. And especially when we're younger, many of us, 80% of us, according to research by Stanford Adolescent Center, don't have a clear vision of who we want to be and what we want to achieve in our life. And I think that's obviously 80% of us. That's more normal than not. And so using these external guides early on in particular, I think it's very natural and it's very normal. And so to your point, where I try to point people in this journey from, okay, I might be using these external things to motivate me, but how do I find myself in that? And so I like to lean towards the idea of congruence or, finding the resonance in it for you. And so, there are 4 motivators that I talk about in my book, Sustainable Ambition. And, the 4 that I reference are, vision. Well, what kind of vision do I have for myself? And again, that's going to change over time. But what do I want for myself? It's looking at, you mentioned purpose. So I like to think about purpose as, how do I want to give or contribute, or kind of what kind of impact do I want to have in the world? Because I think purpose can feel very lofty and big for people and out of reach, but we can learn or kind of ascertain, well, how do I just want to contribute or make an impact in this particular moment? The third is values. What are important to you? And I think we can learn those about ourselves over time, and those tend to be more sticky. And then the final one is, well, what do you love? What really, in the more academic sense, that true intrinsic motivator of kind of like, what do I do just for the pure satisfaction of it? So where I like to coach people is to kind of say, well, where can you align to one of those motivators, right? To find some of yourself in it. Because even if, for example, you have work that you might consider a job, just a job, nothing wrong with that, right? But my hope might be, well, how do you see it connecting for you? How does that job contribute to the vision you have for your life? Maybe it's about, well, it's really important for me to care for my family, and that's how it fits in. That could also be connecting then to a value that's really important to you, right? So there are different ways to, I think, find a little bit of yourself, even if some of these things might start as being extrinsically driven.
How do you think that this pursuit of purpose changes across a lifetime?
I think that's a great question. It's interesting so I'm going to, I do think it can change. And, I'm kind of basing this based on other people's work and what some other people kind of talk about. I think that I'll start with later in life. Often people kind of say, and people have written about, like David Brooks has talked about, like the resume virtues early on. You're trying to it's a little more ego driven. You're trying to achieve things. And then once you get to a certain point, you start to switch to these like eulogy, kind of achievements, so, what do you want to be known for? How do you want to contribute? How you want to give back? People start to talk about legacy a little bit later on. And so I do think that is a natural thing that happens. And yet there's research now that I'm honestly just starting to dig into more that talks about how connecting people to mattering and being able to make a contribution can really support their own self-efficacy. And I was listening to a researcher, unfortunately, I'm going to forget her name right now, but who was talking about this in connection with young kids and how kids, for example, in high school these days, especially high achieving high schools, are getting stressed out and are overly worried about figuring out their path and needing to set themselves up for success. And they're finding that even with some of these kids, connecting them to how can they matter and how can they contribute, and even how do they matter to their family unit and contribute to a family unit, can really help them in terms of, again, building that self-confidence, that self-efficacy, and it's helping from a stress management, mental health perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's take it to the opposite side. When does the ambition turn into self-sabotage?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think about this. So one of the things that I talk about in the book, and I'll admit this is not overly scientific, Lindsey, but I do believe that ambition operates on a U curve in my sense. And so the way that usually is represented in kind of scientific ways is like it actually looks like an upside down U. But it is this idea similar to pressure and performance, where if there's too much pressure, you don't perform. If there's too little pressure, you don't perform. And I think ambition is like that too, where we don't have enough ambition, we can start to become stagnant. And like you were talking about earlier, maybe not getting ourselves up off the couch. We're not feeling engaged. We're not kind of participating in things. We're not feeling motivated. But it can start to, get into the, danger zone, if you will, or I kind of say the severe zone, when we start to get negatively attached to striving, when it gets back to that kind of desire to wanting to do more and more and more. We feel compelled to continuously achieve. And when that starts to lead to us overextending ourselves to the detriment of perhaps putting other things in our life that are really important to us to the side, and we're putting aside our well-being in terms of the pursuit of those ambitions.
So is there a time in life where we kind of get on a curve where sometimes we're really ambitious and then other times it's like, you know what, I am going to take some time off? And how do we get out of this kind of keeping up with the Joneses mentality and allow ourselves like, hey, I just finished my degree, I don't have to do another one right now. Or, I just spent 6 months planning a wedding, I don't have to go on a honeymoon right now. How do we get out of these societal pressures to continue to go, what you kind of call status anxiety, and say, you know what? I have enough ambition for today, and it's not as high as it was 3 days ago.
Yeah, so I love this question, Lindsey, because I do believe that ambition is, does ebb and flow over time. And actually, I would characterize it as ambition has different states of ambition. And so I think what can help people is to, one, what often happens is that people think that about themselves as ambition is kind of a character trait. They see it as part of their identity. I am somebody who is ambitious. And I think if we can help shift people's mindsets from seeing it just as a character trait to actually being like, no, I have different states of ambition. And ambition can go up and down and ebb and flow over time. If we can shift our mindset around that, I think we can then allow ourselves more permission to say, you know what, I don't have to be driving hard all the time. I can give myself a break and actually see that I just went through an intense period. I was ambitious about that now, but I need a break to be able to restore myself. I think the other shift that people can make is to recognize that ambition yes, it's connected to the idea of hard work, something that, it's connected to a desire that you want, that you have, where you want to put in the hard work. But that doesn't mean that you have to be driving hard all the time. Humans operate between two states, right? You use your energy and you need to restore it. And so allowing yourself that space to be able to actually restore your energy as well, I think is really important. So I think it starts with some mindset shifts, as I'm saying, to then give yourself permission to actually dial it down so that you can remain ambitious over a longer time and actually make it sustainable.
Let's talk about, your book is Sustainable Ambition, How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. And you talk about the sustainable ambition framework, where you have 3 pillars, the right ambition, the right time, and the right effort. You say that doing this can help people to chase goals without burnout. And you talked about it on your podcast, and your podcast has the same name, Sustainable Ambition. So talk to us about those 3 pillars and how people can put them into play in their lives.
Yes. So I think about sustainable ambition. Let me just also say, to me, it's about how do we pursue our goals and dreams in a way that's fulfilling, focused, and manageable, both in the short term and the long term, rather than be all-consuming and leading to sacrificing yourself or your life in the process. And so, as you said, it's about, to me, directing our ambitions both consciously and also wisely by aligning the right ambition at the right time with the right effort. So right ambition is really about part of what we talked about before, which is how can we get connected to our goals and ambitions? How can we make them meaningful and motivating to us? So that is about connecting to those motivators that I shared earlier. Right time is about thinking about, well, how can I prioritize what matters most now across life and work, taking both into consideration. And then right effort is about being discerning about where we're using our effort, both how much effort am I putting into things, but then how am I managing my energy over time so I do keep myself sustained. And I think a couple key things just to call out really quickly. One is that people may see the term right as being, oh, there's a right or a wrong way to do this. And what I mean by right is really kind of more that Goldilocks right. It's about getting it right for you. And this is very much a personal activity and a personal practice. And I think that second point that I want to make is related to that word practice, which is, to me, this is not easy. I'm not saying that this is I have a magic wand and I'll cure burnout forever. It's no, this takes constant attunement, and it's a constant practice to kind of keep things in alignment for yourself.
Kathy is the founder of Sustainable Ambition, host of the Sustainable Ambition podcast, and the author of the new book, Sustainable Ambition, How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. This is the Lindsey Elmore Show.